Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Friends, thanks for joining us for another exciting, engaging, and informative episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. We have a very special edition today. We have not just one, not two, but three of our peers that are just pontificating. And that may pacify you and it may provoke you, but whatever it does, it will definitely not put you to sleep, like some of those other things that you might actually do. So I just want to first of all, thank everybody. Make sure if you haven't done this already, like the podcast. Your generous action is what carries this out to other people, informs them, engages them, and hopefully inspires them. At the same time, after you've subscribed to the podcast, share it with a friend. With that, I want to say thanks for Hansel, Matt, and Gynell joining us today. It's your generosity of sharing a bit of your life, your experience, and your perspective that really makes the difference that so many people say thank you for. So I appreciate each of you being part of this today. And with that, Hansel, man, so a lot going on these days. What's on your mind? What have you been focusing on? What's keeping you busy?
Well, we just all got back from the ACTS conference down in San Antonio, which was hosted by the Association of Texas Appraisers.
Yes.
And of course, next year it'll be in Seattle, hosted by ACAL. So a big topic at this ACTS conference was UAD 3.6, where they taught the 7-hour course. And this course is being taught across the country through the Appraisal Institute and other organizations. And some of the software providers were able to kind of do really light demonstrations of the software. And I think there's still just a lot of questions about what this is going to really look like starting in September. And I'm sure that the conversations will be even more intense when we get to ACTS conference in Seattle next year around spring. So I think that'll be a really important conference for people to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Should people be concerned?
Not concerned. I mean, it's just, you just have to think of it as just a lot more detail. You're just having to do a lot more categorization than you've had to in the past. So just one example is zoning. So if you say it's legal zoning, that's pretty easy. But if it's illegal zoning, instead of a few sentences like you may have done in the past or a paragraph, you'll still be able to make that narrative commentary, but you're going to need to actually check a box. Is the illegal zoning because of site size? Is it because of too many units on the property? There's multiple options on that drop-down list. And of course, there's always an other. You can always check other and then explain what the other reason is, but just kind of take that and apply it to every other component of the appraisal processes. Things are going to be a lot more structured in this new format.
Speaking of structure and planting the seed for next year's ACTS conference, I could imagine some people are definitely having FOMO because they weren't there with you guys. I mean, that fear of missing out's real, and San Antonio is now in the rearview mirror, so they can look ahead. So I mean, what did they miss out on with you and Gynell and Matt getting to hang out like that?
I actually missed out too. I wasn't there.
Oh no, Gynell, you missed out too.
In my own backyard, yeah.
I got a little
bit of grief for that.
You gotta hate it when you miss something in your own backyard. Oh no.
But Matt was there, right?
Yeah, I was there. I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaway was kind of that first, live presentation of the 7-hour UAD class and realizing that I think the number is like 275 slides in a 7-hour presentation, which is a lot of information to get through. Yeah, we were really lucky that we had not only Brian Reynolds presenting it, but we had Ken DeFeo in the room who was able to answer, some things from a Fannie Mae point of view. So it was, overwhelming a little bit, I think, to some, as far as the amount of things that are going to be added to the form. It's nothing. I mean, there are some odd things in there, like, measuring the door height from grade that we're going to have to start doing. They explained the why behind it, but, I think the biggest takeaway for me was Brian had asked the room to put their hands up at how many people use iPads for data collection.
Yep.
And it was about a third of the room.
What?
Yeah.
Matt, come on. You got to be kidding me.
it was shocking. And we just did I took the class again yesterday, an Appraisal Institute offering, and the room was about 50-50 split on the iPad.
Oh my gosh.
And the volume of data collection that's part of this going forward, I think that was the biggest takeaway, is like realizing there's a lot of appraisal professionals who are going to need to get kind of versed on the iPad first to hear quickly to be prepared for this change. Otherwise, it's, you can still do it on graph paper and a notepad and pen and pencil and all that, but there's a lot of information you're going to have to regurgitate into your form filler later. And really, nobody knows how that's going to look just yet.
Oh my gosh. Matt, if we could insert sad emoji face right here, that would be a wonderful contribution. I mean, almost as sad, but not as much so as Gynell not making it when it was in her backyard. I mean, this is pretty close, right, Gynell?
Yeah. I'm in Dallas, so it was
Oh,
close.
it's not that close, actually. It's close-er. It's not that close.
Yeah, it's in Texas, so I had some travel plans though out of the country, and so had to go.
And you didn't invite us?
Yeah, it was a trip. So, but I think next year, San Francisco? No, yeah,
Seattle.
Seattle. Sorry, close.
It's on the West Coast. I mean, it's not in Texas, so why do you even know where it is?
Right. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. I plan on being there. It's so insightful going to these ACTS conferences, especially I like the spring. I think maybe closer, more tight-knit group, and there's so much information that's shared. So really important. I was bummed to miss it, and I will be there next year. So.
Totally get that. Matt, I'm just curious. I've never had the luxury of sitting through 275 slides. Is there any, do you recommend Celsius or 4-Hour Energy or Red Bull? Like what's the key?
An extra shot of whatever in your morning drink of choice, whether it be espresso, whatever you need to get through. Like I said, I not only sat through it once, 275 slides, I've now done it twice. And so if you really want to get brain, And the crazy part for me was I actually had takeaways from the second time sitting through that I didn't have on the first one. Just again, different instructors, different point of view. But yeah, no, definitely some extra caffeine or, whatever your morning drink is, and sit back. I mean, I have just pages of notes, in hindsight, should have just used my AI note taker to just, regurgitate it for me. But I got a lot of pen and paper notes from it.
Hansel, I'm sorry, just a quick thing for Matt. I totally heard what you said. I totally connect and agree with it. But if only 1/3 of people have an iPad, I don't think they have any idea what you just said at the end. Could you just enlighten us just a smidge on what you were just describing and how that would support you?
Yeah, what you mean, like the AI note taker stuff?
Exactly. Thanks, Matt. Sorry, I just don't want to lose people here in the conversation.
Totally. Yeah, it's nowadays sitting through long classes, meetings, we do this all the time. We're a company I'm with, like we are a Google Suite, so we use Gemini all the time to just take our meeting notes for us and get a kind of regurgitated text output of summarizing what our meeting was, and it does a pretty good job of outlining, what topics we're talking about, who contributed, what was the takeaway from it, what were the action items that we said we had to. Kind of so long as you converse, and like narrate out some of the details, like the note-taking apps do an amazing job. And, it's nice to go back and refer to. I don't want to always go back and rewatch a recorded meeting or listen to audio notes or rewatch a video that was an hour-long meeting. So that was my only regret from that presentation, was I probably could have got that 7-hour, 275 slides down to a few pages of notes if I would have let my note taker take it for me, but I forgot to turn it on.
Yeah, thank you for that quick explanation. I do appreciate it, because some people are like, what are you talking about? I don't have a secretary. I'm like, well, for a few bucks a month, now you do.
You do.
Michael, every time I'm around these two, I think AI is the appraiser's new best friend, and there's so many great tools, and I love incorporating AI into valuation. And I feel like every time I'm around Hansel and Matt, I hear about another new AI tool and just try to categorize all of them. Yeah, it's a powerhouse.
You mean it meaning AI, or it's a powerhouse meaning Matt and Hansel? I wasn't sure which it.
Both.
Definitely.
Both. Powerhouse is right there. So.
Also, You were getting ready to say something right before Matt took the thoughtful moment just to explain what an AI note taker is.
Oh, it's just one of the other call outs from the conference at ACT. So this is just something you get from going to the conferences is if you do go to that Fannie Mae website, there's a whole bunch of documents there about 3.6.
Yes.
And so it can be a bit confusing for an appraiser as, if you just download all of them, it can be like, oh, where do I even start? And so the one to really kind of latch onto is the F1 URAR reference guide.
Mm.
And so that's a starting point. I mean, you can take a look at the format. There's, it's got some examples for you to look at.
Yeah.
But that's the F1 is the one to really grab. And I'll just kind of give you an example as to why. So Matt mentioned the front door elevation data point that we're going to have to put into the appraisal. So that's on page 90 of the F1. Yeah, it's a 341 page guide. But here's what we're going to run into, right? So it's not so simple as just what's the front door elevation. It's the little notes on page 90. So for example, for 2 to 4 unit properties with multiple units in a building, choose the answer for the unit door with the lowest elevation from grade. So, but that's just one little tiny note. So you can imagine an appraiser is going to go out and do a 2 to 4 unit. They will not have read this. And so they're going to make a phone call. They're going to call a friend. They're going to call your appraiser. They're going to call a chief appraiser and say, what do you expect me to put in this field? Well, on page 90 of the F1, it says you got to choose the door that's the lowest to the ground.
Yes.
That's and there's a whole bunch of these notes in here, but that's where the learning is going to have to take place over the next couple of years is learning all these little nuances for each data field, new format.
Holy smokes. Yeah, that whole sense of when you put your mouse over the top of some particular image and then like a little box pops up and you're like, okay, do I even understand what the box says? Do I keep Matt on speed dial? Like, how do we even?
That's the best option is to call Matt.
That's what I do.
Yeah, and I think the craziest part about all that too is, like, again, to the point there, like the F1, I think is the most important thing. And aside from getting familiar with data collection on the iPad, I think the next thing is having F1 on your desktop and going through it, and whether you want to feed it into kind of an LLM type thing or download the PDF and just search it and ask it questions and learn from it, because there's a lot in there. But I think the hardest thing I'm realizing talking to our appraisers is the form is, well, there's no form anymore. They're really big on hitting that detail over and over and over. It's a report now.
Yeah.
But the form, so to say, changes as you give it more information. So like the same form is for a 1004, a 1025, a 1073, all those numbers go away. And now we're working on one document that organically changes, like as you tell it what you're doing. So to have everybody prepared for what situation on a site inspection, like, you're going to have to capture a lot of information that may or may not be relevant when it comes time to sit down and type your report. But the last thing you want to do is try to remember out, a triplex, which one of those 3 doors was the lowest when you get back to your desk and have to fill out that form, that field on the form or the report. But yeah, the thing I like the most about this, though, and I just reminded myself of something, I believe Scott Reuter said it at PAX, was the form has become the process. Over the last, decade or so, appraisers have just been very comfortable filling out the form, whereas the report is now the output of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And like that philosophical thinking, like I really got that resonated with me. Like I really like that thought process, because it is hard to try to teach some appraisers to stop thinking that the 1004 is a USPAP compliant appraisal report that you can live and die by. It's just a form. So this definitely helps you get a little bit more aligned with, being compliant and, the process versus the report just being, what we do.
I really do appreciate you highlighting that, Matt. And while I have many comments and many times they're either sometimes demeaning, I know that was hard to imagine I would ever be like that, or sarcastic. I know that's extremely far-fetched, especially for me. But that reference really got driven home for me when I had moved beyond. I was always investing And that's how I got into valuation. And then that's how I got into appraisal. But the difference between doing residential work versus commercial work, because most commercial work isn't done on a form, most residential work is, and that sense of teaching people to appraise to the form as opposed to teaching people to solve valuation puzzles and then choose the method of which you want to communicate that. And unlike Gynell, I didn't go abroad, but I also had travel commitments that I couldn't make it to Axe because of my other training work that I was doing. And I think about that means of transportation. So the idea is like, I'm here. What's my means of transportation? And then I'm going to get there. And your point around this new technology, which is really just valuation, and it's not about the means. It's not about, are you walking? Are you jogging? Are you taking a bicycle? Are you taking an Uber? Are you driving? Are you taking a train or a plane or boat? Like whatever your means of transportation is, you're going to get to the end result, which that is an opinion of value. So I really appreciate you highlighting that, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's constantly reminding ourselves like the evolution of like what we need to do, right? Like I think my personal point of view in a lot of this change is it's intended to be maybe a purge of poor appraisers to a degree. Like we want to elevate the process, which I'm all behind. I would love to see that. I think this report, like the report format actually lends to, I think personally appraising better, like having instead of long-winded addendas that have every hidden comment from, what my mentor told me my first day from what I learned every year thereafter for 26 years, like it's not a word salad addenda anymore. The addendas sections go in the appropriate part of the report. The pictures go to the appropriate section of the report. If you market conditions and charts, they go to that appropriate section of the report. It's not all this stuff hidden in the back of the report. So it's not only better to the reader, but I just think it's such a potential for a much better communicated process, which then hopefully makes us better. But there's a lot of noise in this too. It's kind of hard to find that balance right now.
Yeah. Hansel, do you share the same perspective?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just things we should have been doing all along, and this new format is a forcing function to make us do some things that maybe we don't have the muscle across our entire workforce just yet. I mean, I'll give you another example. So one of the fields is property restrictions. Now, a lot of properties don't have any restrictions if it's just a home in a normal SFR neighborhood, with Pulte and Darling homes and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of properties in this country that have some form of restriction. And so I think a lot of times you're just going to say none, no restrictions. Yep. But there's a drop-down menu there. Age restrictions, historic preservation restrictions, income, land use, rental, sale price, and other. So if you get into an area that's not, very uniform and vanilla, you're going to have to do that extra research into not just the subject, but every one of the comps you use to make sure you're clearing all those categories and making sure that there's not any restrictions in place. And then, if you think about it, if your subject property does have a restriction, you're going to need to try to find comps that also have similar restrictions in order to appropriately address it in the appraisal. And maybe that's an extra step that some appraisers haven't been taking in the past. But you're going to have to start to do it now, just with that one field right there. And, it gets into other things like there's an encroachment section, does it have a building encroachment, a driveway encroachment, fence, overhang, other? Again, it's very categorical, and it's just going to require extra research of each one of your comps. And I think in a lot of cases, I think real estate agents are going to be surprised. I would hope that they're surprised, because I think in a lot of these cases, we're going to have to actually get on the phone and start to talk with our real estate peers out there to figure out some of these questions.
I totally agree. That's why we call Gynell, because she's that very friendly, compassionate voice to extract all the information that we need in a timely manner.
That sounds exactly like me. Doesn't it? Did they talk much? I'm gonna be the interviewer here. Did they talk much about AI? Sorry, Michael. I'm just jumping in because I wasn't
No,
there.
Gynell, please. It's not about me. I'm just here.
Yeah.
I'm just part of the conversation.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, to say, I mean, I feel like AI is probably topic that the appraisal space is kind of tiptoeing around right now, right? Like it's definitely coming. A lot of that question is going to be came up in our class yesterday that we had, and they defaulted to the software providers, right? It's going to be on the software providers how they want to integrate or how the practitioners want to utilize outside of the software, right? I don't know that our industry is like fully said, like, this is, or Fannie and Freddie don't seem to have come out and said, this is how you need to use AI. But obviously, it's a tool. There's a lot of ways to leverage it and get better analysis. I think it's kind of the implied part of this, because to the point you were just making about a lot of the increased things that the drop downs that Hannah was pointing out. The next thing, I already heard this yesterday in the class and at X, the increased scope of work, the increased amount of time and energy. What is this going to do to fees? Nobody knows the answer to that yet, because again, we don't really know because we've never typed one of these on the software yet. But I think it's kind of implied. We're going to have to leverage tools to get more efficient. Otherwise, calling every single agent for every single thing. That's the way we have to do it right now. But there's going to be databases that are going to be created and grown, and we're going to be able to get this information hopefully in a more expeditious kind of manner. But right now, well, there's a clean answer on the AI thing right now. I know I'm trying to play with it. We're exploring it a ton, and trying to figure out what we can do with it and how we can take away steps in the process that are easily eliminated. However, bigger picture AI is still very much TBD. I don't know if you have a different take on that.
Well, the ASC just had a meeting yesterday, so I watched that where they're talking about put out a Q&A. They're asking questions. They're asking how we're currently using AI, and they're exploring potentially taking another look at the use path and specifically addressing AI. So they're exploring this right now. And they did comment on it and just said, it's the really obvious stuff. Like there's confidentiality that has to be abided by. You've got to be competent in these tools. If you feel like there's any hallucinations going on, then you shouldn't use that technology, or you should know how to avoid hallucinations and stuff. My approach to AI is I really hope that we approach this and do it right, because it is so incredibly powerful. And maybe right now there are some hallucinations, but in 1 year from now, it'll be twice as powerful. 2 years from now, who knows where it's going to be? I mean, and it's like, I kind of liken it to, I do some woodworking and stuff, and I've got some manual tools like hand saws and hand planes and stuff like that. And so when you go from like a hand saw, which you can do really great work with hand saws and stuff like that. You can be incredibly precise. It's relatively safe, but it doesn't compare to a table saw. And there is some risk when you jump up to a table saw. It can do some serious damage if you don't know what you're doing. But the increase in productivity is so great that you have to use. If you're going to do that kind of work, you have to use it. You just can't. It doesn't make any sense to use a hand saw. It takes forever. But that's what we're up against here. This, it's like going from no electricity to electricity. It's a major multiplier of power. And I don't have all the answers there, but I see it as something that every appraiser in our country will be using, no matter what.
Agree. I think of it as the new tool, just like spreadsheets were 30 years ago. There's a learning curve, there's an adjustment, but it's kind of a very capable assistant, or can be, for appraisers. We just have to know how to use them correctly. That can help with efficiency, it can help with accuracy. And it's here, and I think we just need to embrace it. First we have to use tablets, and then we can move to AI.
Wait a minute. Gynell, what's a tablet?
It's uphill, you have to take.
But I think that's the biggest uphill climb in all of this, right? Again, like being really taken back by the low number of people using even just a tablet to sketch and photograph. to realize then getting this whole same population to take on an idea like AI, which is scary to even those who've been using technology regularly in their life. It's powerful. But something you just said just kind of sparked something for me. And like the spreadsheets. I remember like the first time you kind of learned how to utilize Excel to its potential. It was mind blowing to be able to like create pivots and look at data in ways that you didn't know how to do. And then now to be able as appraisers to not just focus on 3-6 comparable properties in a very small group sample, but you can populate hundreds, thousands of pieces of data and pull out a lot of really cool takeaways from it that by hand would take you hours upon hours to do. Completely doable. We've all taken classes on it. I know, there's a million different ways to do all these different things, but to be doing so quickly and then morph into the appraiser being the analyst that I think we're supposed to be versus what I mentioned about earlier, kind of the form fillers that I think a lot of us have become just because that's what's been asked of us. But yeah, AI is going to be just a giant tool in this. It's just, I have some concerns, like Handel said, it's as far as can take you down from dangerous places if you don't know how to do that, which is, I think an easy thing right now for some people to do is just kind of play around with making small kind of the LLM, like the language model things, and only giving it the sources that you trust as credible. Like dropping in just the selling guide and just the 4000.1 and the VA handbook or whatever, and only searching things that you trust, because if it's not in there, it won't give you the answer.
Right.
That's a great way to start. And then obviously the art of learning prompting and all that. Like that's a whole other world of, teaching it. You got to learn how to ask the questions right to get the proper answer. So it's exciting. And I think that we have this conversation a year or two from now, we might all be having a different tone about it. It's like the last 6 months, it's grown exponentially. And what's going to do the next 6 to 12 is going to be crazy.
I think in the appraisal space, AI's value really rises or falls with the appraiser. It's the information you feed it, how well you scrub the data, how you frame your prompts, and then applying sound judgment, right? That's just the major factors. If you neglect that, it's just a whole lot of noise.
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the US Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up? Much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
But that keeps the appraiser involved, and that's what makes me excited. I think a lot of people are super scared of appraisers being replaced. Like I heard it yesterday.
Right.
Oh, this is Fannie Freddie's way of removing the appraiser. And it's like, I don't know. Like the amount of data necessary to do one of these now, I don't know how you take them out of the equation. And then with all these different variables that have to be analyzed, considered in what is the most emotional thing anybody ever does is buy a home. I have a hard time thinking this doesn't more empower the appraiser. It just empowers the appraiser to be something different that they've been the last however many years. So we have to adapt, but I don't think the use of AI, appraiser on top of AI is the greatest combination to me versus AI. I think I'll replace it.
Our value as appraisers is in our investigation capabilities. If this country had a uniform 50-state data set that was absolutely perfect and accurate, I would be concerned. But that is not the way it is. Our zoning across this country is so diverse and it constantly is changing. The data sets are incomplete. Small communities hardly have any data. There's pocket listings. I mean, there's historical properties, there's meth homes, there's environmental issues and overlays and landslide zones, and it's so complex, and the data is so incomplete that, yeah, I mean, the reporting is one thing, but our values and our ability to understand our local areas and do the investigation that's necessary to put out a credible product. And you just have to embrace that. You've got to pick up the phone and you got to know real estate agents. You got to call zoning districts and look at comprehensive 20-year plans for the city and know what's going on and verify data points left and right. And that's the value we do. And I don't see that ever going away because real estate's so complex out there. Maybe if it's like a vanilla property in a residential neighborhood, I can see that, that's already stuff that's going away, but there's so much more real estate out there for us to deal with.
Yeah. I think AI is more like having really sharp research assistants or interns. We're still needed. We need our expertise. We need to make those sound judgments. It just can help with a lot of the grunt work and, study a lot of data for us quicker and using plain language, prompts. That's very helpful. So I think it's here to stay, and, we need to embrace it. We need to embrace that tablet and then AI, and we're good to go.
The head on the handle that, I mean, I think you just hit it. I think on the head is the importance of picking up the phone and being the appraiser, being a fixture in your local real estate market. And
Hey, Matt, do you mind if I ask you to speak up just a little bit more?
Oh, sorry. Yep, that's sorry. The picking up the phone, right? Like that's to me the biggest part of this. Like you have to be a fixture in your local real estate market, right? Because as appraisers, I think we tend to be the lone wolf and retreat into the background and just want to head down, do our job, and be left alone. But all this data, all this AI, everything there, the willingness to pick up the phone, the willingness to be involved in your local, go to the meetings, go to, we do a monthly happy hour thing where we've been bringing in local, speakers to speak about zoning changes and things like that, and trying to get our local groups of appraisers out there to listen to it and hear about what's going on. But that's the biggest thing. We can do that on top of AI. The appraiser becomes invaluable to my personal opinion. And I think Hansel hit that. It's just too many appraisers don't want to pick up the phone. And that's probably the biggest detriment we do to ourselves.
I'll give you a really funny example. Is we had an appraisal and we were getting all these revision requests because they were saying that the zip code was incorrect. And that was in one city versus another city. And I was like, no, this is the correct zip code. And we were checking all the data sources and all that kind of stuff. And they were like, no. Our data sets are saying it's in McKinney, Texas, not I think it was Princeton. And so finally, it does.
Not McKinney versus over there, but I mean, the property's where the property's at.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. Like you should be using McKinney comps versus Princeton, right? So this is the concern. And nobody had picked up the phone. I finally call Princeton City Hall and I need to talk to somebody about this property. And they patched me through to somebody, and I mentioned as soon as I started saying the address, I hear this really big sigh. And she just stops me and she goes, okay, so here's the deal, because you're not the first person to call me about this. Yeah. I was like, oh boy, here we go. So that neighborhood had originally belonged to McKinney. But in the midst of the development, they're like, no, we're going to make this part of Princeton. But the data sets had not changed. And so she tells me this whole story about all the legal stuff that had happened. Yep. And she goes, I'm having to tell the story day in and day out because real estate appraisers and all these companies are calling me trying to figure this out. And she goes, she's just getting worn out by it. I was like, well, thank you. So I took her name down. I explained this whole thing to the client. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
You know what? I was just thinking that if I had Matt's AI note take, I could have just consolidated all of that and it would have done a nice summation and just copy and paste that right into a communication.
Yeah. But that's what happens in real estate. It happens all the time. And and it's not in the data set. It's not going to be an AI. It's what's this person on the other end of the phone. And she's like, all right, let's do this again.
Yeah. That makes a big, big difference. And I think that's one of the fascinating things. And I really commend all the work that's being done to help prepare as opposed to like, ooh, let's take off. The plane's leaving now. It's like, no, there's still time between now and then. There's still a lot of work to be done. But more importantly, and my greatest appreciation comes in the acknowledgement, as each of you have touched on so far, is being a valuation pilot versus just the person, that's down there, throwing bags on the plane. Still an important thing if you want to carry, if you checked your bags, like you want to make sure they get there. But more than that, you want to make sure the plane actually gets to where it's supposed to go. And that ability to navigate the situation, like the property, how it sits in the marketplace, its competitive positioning or not, challenges, restrictions, obstructions, whatever it might be, which is more than just, hey, in most cases, what would you say, 80% of the time? It's like, look, you're going to find competing sales really close by. It's going to be pretty easy. But the difficult ones, I think now we're actually going to see really will require someone who can actually determine value and not just choose 3 sales that comply with the old Fannie Mae guidelines of, hey, it's got to be within certain distance and certain percentages. And like those all went away because the market is what the market is and it does what it does.
Agreed.
It all comes down to storytelling, right? And I think that, again, going back to the UAD changes, like there are some things in there that I'm a big fan of being added, and I'll probably catch some hell from some appraisers on this one. But it's like, there's a section of comps considered that weren't utilized. And like, I absolutely love this section because the example we had yesterday was how many times did an appraiser throw in a comparable solely to bracket something and then say they gave it no weight, which kind of defeats the purpose of it being in your analysis at all, because you're telling it's irrelevant to the reader, but I did it because of this arbitrary perceived guideline or something that I have to satisfy. So the ability to now, write the section of the report just after your sales comparison to be like, hey, here it is. Here's the sale that I utilized that shows you we're not an over improvement or under improvement, and it brackets this amenity. But I'm not going to grid this because it makes 0 sense in my appraisal report. Is this going to put a lot of stress on the underwriting world? I imagine they have as much of an uphill lift on this as we are, as far as like understanding how to read this new form and knowing how we can utilize it differently. Another section that I love, it's an increased scope of work section, but it's also the land sales. I mean, I review a lot of appraisal reports for people either applying to our organization or in our organization or whatever, and a lot of times, I used land sales. And there's no land sale there, and there's no data in their work file. And then again, big state complaint is work file support, and that stuff's not in their work files. That's a section of the report now. If you say you're using sales comparison for your land value, you have to illustrate your land sales now. You can no longer just say, I did land sales and then period, move on with your life. You have to show your work a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the same idea with the income approach. There's a section where if you do a market extracted GRM, they're going to expect you to kind of show where you got your market extracted GRM for versus you just saying, I did it, trust me, it's there. And then yet your rentals and your sales don't line up that same way. It doesn't mean that you have to do these sales comparison approaches for GRM or land sales, but we're in a show your work era too. I guess it's probably something we haven't hit on too much where, adjustment support, market analysis, these type of things. Like we're just in this big show your work mindset, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Is that a bad thing, Matt, to show your work?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing. I'll say this, as every good appraiser who's been doing great quality work and has had all the work file support and everything for forever, they're probably going to be frustrated with it because my word should carry, my reputation should carry, so on and so forth. We have an industry where I don't think everyone has done that work. So now, some people have to pay the price for others, but at the end of the day, we have to do this. If we did it, why not show it? It's going to be hard to separate in a unified report with no addenda and no like way to kind of separate yourself. All of our reports are going to look the same. So the only way to step out is going to be how you explain in these addenda paragraphs that are in each section and how you show your work. If you can separate there, that's where the good appraisers are hopefully going to keep capturing, more work for themselves and get, the better clients.
And
Yeah.
one other key element that I'm excited about that's going to have to go away, I think, with this new not form appraisal is that 1004MC. That's just going to have to
Oh no! Oh, I love
It's
that form
no
so
longer
much.
increasing, declining, stable. How about it's a little more dynamic then? Alrighty.
I'm trying so hard to stay in my stance and not jump off sides because I hate that form. I've hated it. That's what it's one of my biggest soapbox things. So if this is the way that we'd never see that form ever again, retired for how long, nobody would be happier than me. I don't think it's sufficient for.
I will. I'll be thrilled.
Oh my gosh, Hansel, will you have any little small vial of tears
Will
in
do.
the departure and demise of the 1004MC? Oh, you changed your audio and we can't hear you now.
There you go.
If you could see it, I mean, I can't imagine that there are enough highly absorbent cloths to capture the volume of tears streaming down his face right now. Hansel?
I'm going to use sign language.
So the power of podcasting is that it's not video, so you can't see the hand gesture. Can you all hear?
No, I can't.
Actually,
That's
record
weird.
higher quality.
Well, Hansel, if you want to pop out and pop right back in, if that maybe resets it. But in the meantime, I mean, it's so bad that he has to actually leave the podcast and come back. That's how impactful the departure of the 1004MC shall be for.
Finally, let's put that to rest. Jeez.
Oh my goodness. It's it's one of those things where so much of what we live with is reaction to what wasn't done in the past. And that was definitely one of them. But speaking of the past, coming back to the future, Hansel, it's great to see you.
There he is. No?
Oh
No, that is weird.
Where's your headphones?
Here.
Ran out of battery. Forgot to charge it last night.
Well, good old technology. You know what? Matt, would his AI note taker have helped him with the headset?
Probably could have had some reminders. We're gonna get to a day where we're gonna have we'll have the little glasses or earpieces that are constantly talking to us. I don't think I want that kind of stimulation. Right? With the guy yesterday who had a really cool pair of glasses, and I'm like, I can't look at the stuff in my lenses. I need a separation from the real world and that. But I won't be surprised if we have a little butler who follows us around and reminds us all the things we said.
Butlers that follow. That could be the case. Hansel, you back with us? You know what? I can actually, his volume's just really, really low.
Yeah.
Like when you spoke, I can't hear what you're saying, but I could actually, like on a scale 1 to 10, it was like 0.5. I have no idea how to solve that tech issue, and I don't have an AI assistant to do it. So in the meantime, Matt, I am just curious, given all that went on at Axe, and of course, Gynell and I were just overwhelmed with sadness for being somewhere else and missing out on all the fun that you and Hansel and others had. What's your outlook for the increase in time to complete an assignment? Because I think that's the conversation that probably is being had for some behind doors, and for others, they don't even know what's coming. And I have my own estimate, but it's dire and dismal. Maybe you're more optimistic.
That's
No,
my
no.
question.
It's hard to say without again seeing what the software is going to deliver to us. Like it looks like a majority of them are going to go more towards like a TurboTax kind of way of going through it. Like you're just going to be answering questions and you're going to get a report output. So I can see where the mindset of there'll be some momentum in the process once you get used to the process. But like the first time you did we did iPads. Apparently a majority of people don't. But those site inspections took longer in the beginning, and then you hit a rhythm. And I would argue now that if I had my disto and an iPad, I can probably get out of there in the same amount of time as anybody with graph paper and a pencil. Like I'm in my routine now. The data collection part, I think, is definitely going to get slower. I think site inspections, I think there's going to have to be educating market participants, that the appraiser is not going to be in and out of the house. You might be there for an extended period of time, especially if a home's multi-unit or ADUs or outbuildings or there's just going to be a lot more data to collect. I think overall net, it's going to be a significant amount of more time. Short term, I don't know what it's going to look like long term until I can kind of have a better feel of what software providers are going to do for us. But bring us full circle back to the AI conversation. Maybe that's where some of this stuff gets captured. There's a lot of things in the process and that I think can be automated. And, within our appraisal reports, a lot of the sections domino to one another. So maybe there is a way that AI helps us capture some of that time back. But I'm expecting longer time. The conversation came up at both the FHFA meeting and AX about fees. Because with increased time, we have an issue with fees potentially, right? And nobody really had a clean answer aside from it's all going to be dependent on the amount of time into this and then obviously market demand. So, but the fact that, I think Lyle said it at the AX conference, we all need to be evaluating your fee schedules. Like that's a practitioner issue. That's not a Fannie Mae issue. That's, appraisers and their clients coming to an agreement there. But the fact that that was even brought up was very telling to me that I think the expectation is time to increase.
Hansel, you're able to contribute? I actually heard you say, I don't think you can hear me, but I just can't hear the volume.
Yes, the volume's low.
Yeah. That is supposed to. I agree with you, Matt. In a conversation I think Hansel and I had a couple months back, or maybe it was longer than that, I'm actually a fan of where this is going because I think it is going to further elevate those that solve valuation puzzles. I'm pro differentiating professionals in the industry, and this is the way to do it: is can you appraise the property, not just fill in a form? All in favor of that. And I also appreciate that many of the individuals that'll speak at conferences from a federal racketeering standpoint can't encourage you to set fees because that's against the law. But what we can discuss is, look, how much is your time worth per hour? And whatever your time is worth per hour, think an attorney. Then if it's going to take you, instead of maybe you take 5 or 10 hours to do a report, if it takes you 40 hours, then your fee needs to go up. Just do the math. It's now taking you 400% longer. So your fee needs to go up by 400%. And it's not about, are the banks going to pay or not? The banks don't pay anyway. They pass it on to the consumer. The consumer pays a ton of money to a ton of people at closing. And you know who they don't pay a ton of money to? The real estate valuer. That person doesn't get paid. I mean, even the title agent who does nothing makes a boatload of money compared to the appraiser. And all they're relying on is their own data set. And they have the title reviewers that do perform an extremely important role every once in a while. But most of the time, it's absolutely not. But who consistently performs an important role that many people rely on is that appraiser, is that, real estate valuer. And, for far too long, the fees have been far too low. And it's not about technology and it's not about other activities. You show me an attorney who's charging less today than they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 25 years ago. And I would argue that at least in a real estate closing, if not especially litigation matters, and we do a ton of litigation, that is the most important. You're the expert in the whole thing. And so I very much support everything you're all sharing. And I am so excited to watch fees go to into the thousands. I don't know about 10,000, but I'd love to see appraisal fees at $4,000 or $5,000. That's going to change the industry. I mean, suddenly there's room for actually profitable businesses operating and investment in education, technology, advancement, development, all the things that healthy and successful companies do, like Apple and like Tesla. And, you pick the company that they're profitable and they reinvest. But when they're not profitable, what do? They skimp. And of course, Gynell, I know, you're just sitting there shaking your head. Maybe I apologize. Maybe my numbers weren't big enough.
No comment.
No comment. Come on, man. Jump in the pool, Gynell.
I'm happy to pile on that one. I think the biggest thing you said, Michael, is the dollar per hour. I think looking at the minds of so many appraisers think of the flat fee of the assignment and the way these are going to get ordered now. Again, there's no more 1004, 1073, 1025. You're just going to get an appraisal report.
Yep.
And then you're going to have to give the output. So how do you, right now, most people charge more for a 1025 than they do a 1004. Well, you can't do that anymore. There's no form difference. So you're going to have to get an assignment with an address and to dictate on $1 per hour, how much time am I into this? What is my time worth? And this is my fee. And however that shakes out, I want to see appraised. And again, the other thing he said is that it all ties to development and education, which industry topic we didn't hit on today, which is trainees and the lack thereof and the lack of diminishing license numbers and all that. Well, if fees get to a certain point, there's a lot more room for practitioners to train the next generation of appraisers in this new way of doing it. But that does not happen if fees don't get corrected.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And I'll speak for Hansel when I say that the important thing is, like, what are we doing to make a difference going forward, not just for ourselves, but for others? And technology can definitely aid us in the process. But, part of it is being able to, prove the value that you provide. And as you touched on, Matt, that makes such a big difference. Whether you love the coming change or you hate the coming change, it's going to be that opportunity to say, look, what I do matters. And it matters so much that, if my fees only, pick a number, $200 an hour, then, okay, then that's how much an assignment fee needs to be, much like any attorney or accountant would otherwise handle this. So I'm all in favor of what you're saying, Matt.
Yeah, it shakes out.
And it all shakes out. Hansel, any parting words for your powerful, quiet voice over there? Yeah, I can hear you. If you say it, I can repeat it.
Says you need to download the F1 or the Axe conference in Seattle next year. And
Okay. Yep. Got it. So what he said is he loves you and he misses you. And he wants to see you next year at the Seattle Axe conference. But in the meantime, to prepare for that, you need to go and download the F1 from the website and start to familiarize yourself with it so that you can come prepared and make the most of your time to get together at the Axe conference in the spring of next year. And yes, Gynell will be there. She won't be traveling on an exotic European vacation because she already has the dates. Okay.
There you go.
Gynell, anything you want to contribute as we wrap up?
I would say, we have the three of us here from Dallas, and with everything going on, all these changes coming up, it makes for excellent discussion. And Dallas Fort Worth appraisers should come out and join us. We have a monthly mixer. I don't want to call it a happy hour. Mixer sounds more professional. Yeah, so we usually post it on LinkedIn. You can get all the details from there, but we have great conversation, and we usually have excellent speakers too. So
Appreciate that.
good way to stay in touch.
Gynell, when they search LinkedIn, what are they searching for to find that?
Hansel.
You should have had notes. You're going to have to give a little more than that one.
It's the real deal DFW mixer.
Okay.
It's on the ATA website too, the Association of Texas Appraisers.
Got it.
And Teresa usually sends it out as well.
Okay.
So
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Matt, for you?
I want to add on, just get involved. Local organizations, national organizations, whatever. There's a lot of opportunity right now. Be involved. Small local groups. I think appraisers need to network more together and not look at everybody as competition, like soundboard off from one another, grow from one another. And then just, again, be optimistic and open-minded to the changes. We can spin it positive. We can find a way. If not, self-fulfilling prophecy. We want it to be doom and gloom. It'll be doom and gloom. We want to find a way to make it better. Hopefully we find that way.
Appreciate it, Matt. And I just want to thank you, Matt, and thank you, Gynell, and thank you, Hansel, for being part of this and really bringing a taste of the Axe conference here, as well as planting seeds for what's going to sprout ahead of us and have the opportunity to bloom. And those that really want to embrace it and go after it, I think there's much greener pastures ahead. To your point, Matt, I'm really excited about it. And at the same time, learning new things can be hard. And, adult learning isn't as easy as when you're like 9 years old and everything you just absorb stuff. That's why little kids can learn like 10 languages at the same time. And I can't learn a second one, but little by little we can get there. So I appreciate the encouragement, excited for what's coming. And I appreciate what each one of you all are doing in your own little and large ways to move the industry forward. So thank you so much.
thanks, Michael. Thanks for having us.
For having us.
Excellent. Everybody have a great day. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to Matt or Gynell or Hansel and say, oh my gosh, I have an iPad. I mean, they'll be so excited to hear that from you. Until the next episode, we thank them for this bonus opportunity to get together with a recap of acts and foreshadowing of what's next.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.